The Odyssey cut through the darkness of space like a knife through silk, its hull scarred from past conflicts, its engines humming with a tired but stubborn persistence. Captain Elias Carter leaned against the control panel, staring at the blinking coordinates on his NAV screen. The job had been vague. Pick up cargo at the fringe of Draconian space, no questions asked, and deliver it to a location that had yet to be disclosed. It was the kind of deal that usually spelled trouble. But trouble had been Elias's closest companion for years. As the ship approached the rendezvous point, an asteroid field shimmered in the distance, the debris swirling in slow, chaotic patterns. A small transport vessel, barely visible against the void, waited among the drifting rocks. Elias flicked a switch on his comms. Unidentified vessel, this is the Odyssey. I'm here for the pickup. A pause. Then, a static-laced voice crackled through. Docking sequence initiated. Elias narrowed his eyes. No identification, no confirmation of the cargo. He reached instinctively for the pistol at his hip, a habit born from too many back-alley deals gone wrong. The docking clamps engaged, the ship shuddering as the airlocks connected. The door hissed open, and she stepped inside. She wasn't what Elias expected. Draconians were a warrior race, towering and reptilian, but this woman was something else. Her features were sharp, her violet eyes luminous beneath the hood that concealed most of her face. The ridges along her forehead and cheekbones were more delicate than those of the brutish warlords Elias had encountered before. She moved with the poise of someone who had spent a lifetime being watched, judged, and prepared for something greater than herself. Behind her, a shadow loomed. The beast was enormous, twice Elias's height, its muscular frame coiled with latent power. Black scales shimmered like polished onyx, and its deep-set eyes burned like molten gold. A snarl rumbled from its throat, revealing fangs longer than Elias's forearm. The ship's lighting cast flickering patterns across its thick hide, making it seem more nightmare than flesh. Elias didn't flinch. Instead, he crossed his arms and exhaled slowly. This wasn't in the job description. The woman pulled back her hood, revealing dark, curling horns that framed her regal face. Circumstances changed. Elias studied her. She was young, but her expression carried the weight of something older, something burdened by responsibility. He'd seen that look before in soldiers who had lost too much too quickly. "You're running," he said flatly. She held his gaze. "I am." Elias glanced at the beast, which huffed, filling the air with the scent of smoldering embers. "And that?" "He's with me." A low growl vibrated through the air, and Elias's fingers twitched toward his gun. The beast's eyes flickered toward the movement, its lips peeling back slightly, but the woman raised a hand. The creature stilled. Elias sighed. "I don't transport live cargo, especially the kind that breathes fire." "You do now." Something in her voice, an edge of authority, of desperation tightly leashed, made Elias hesitate. He had a rule. Never take a job without knowing what he was getting into. But something about her, about the way she stood, as if she were used to giving orders but had suddenly found herself without an army to command, made him pause. He exhaled sharply. "Fine. But if your pet burns a hole in my ship, you're paying for the repairs." A flicker of something crossed her face. Relief, maybe, but she masked it quickly. Understood. The moment the airlock sealed behind them, Elias felt the weight of his decision settle in. The beast, as expected, was less than accommodating. It prowled through the narrow corridors of the Odyssey, its claws clicking against the metal floor. Elias watched it warily, its golden eyes tracking his every movement with an intensity that made his skin prickle. It wasn't just an animal. It was watching him, studying him. Elias turned his attention to the woman, who had taken a seat in the cockpit, her hands resting on her lap with deceptive calm. "Name?" "Alzaria." His jaw tightened. He had suspected she was important, but the confirmation sent a flicker of unease through him. The Draconian royal family was notorious, their reach spanning multiple systems, their warriors feared across the galaxy. And the beast. Drakthar. Elias exhaled through his nose. "Right." He tapped a few controls, setting the ship into motion. "So, Princess, who are you running from?" Her expression remained unreadable. "My family." That was answer enough. Elias had tangled with royalty before. Fallen nobles, disgraced heirs, people who thought their bloodlines entitled them to special treatment even in exile. They were trouble. The kind that got people killed. The comms crackled. A warning light blinked on his dashboard. Incoming ships. Elias's stomach sank. "Tell me that's not who I think it is." Alzaria didn't answer. She didn't need to. Elias cursed under his breath and yanked the controls, sending the Odyssey into a sharp turn. The ship groaned in protest, but he knew better than to wait for a proper scan. If Draconian warships were on their tail, they had seconds, maybe less, before things got messy. "Strap in," he ordered, flipping switches in rapid succession. A deep, guttural snarl erupted behind him. He turned just in time to see Drakthar's muscles bunch, its scales shifting as fire rumbled in its throat. "Oh, hell no." He slammed the cockpit door shut just as the beast let loose a plume of flame, the heat licking against the reinforced walls. The ship's internal systems blared warnings, red flashing across the console. Alzaria stood unfazed. "He's protecting us." Elias shot her a glare. "He's going to kill us." The ship shuddered as laser fire streaked past, close enough to rattle the hull. Elias gritted his teeth. No time to argue. He flipped the thrusters to max burn, sending the Odyssey hurtling into the asteroid field. Behind them, the warships hesitated. Draconian pilots were elite, but even they wouldn't risk high-speed maneuvers through unstable debris. Elias exhaled through clenched teeth. "You're going to tell me everything, Princess. Because if I just signed up to smuggle you across the galaxy while your people are hunting you down, I want to know exactly what kind of death I'm staring at." Alzaria's expression hardened. "You're staring at war, Captain." Elias didn't like the sound of that, but as the Draconian warships faded into the distance, as the heat of pursuit ebbed into a cold, uneasy silence, he knew one thing for certain. He was in far deeper than he'd intended, and there was no turning back now. The Odyssey drifted through the vast silence of space, its hull scarred from the narrow escape. Inside, the tension thickened like a storm on the verge of breaking. Elias paced the cockpit, hands gripping the back of his chair, eyes fixed on the navigation screen. No immediate pursuit. That was the good news. The bad news? He had no idea where to go next. Behind him, Alzaria stood with practiced stillness, her violet eyes locked onto the stars. She had said little since the escape, offering only fragments of information. Her exile, the unwanted marriage, the war brewing in the shadows of the Draconian Empire. But Elias knew she was still holding back. Drakthar, the beast she called her protector, lay coiled near the corridor, its golden eyes half-lidded but never fully at rest. Elias could feel the weight of its gaze, an unspoken warning. The creature tolerated him, but only just. "We need allies," Alzaria said finally, her voice steady. "We won't survive alone." Elias turned, arms crossed. "You're assuming I'm still part of this." She met his gaze without hesitation. "You are." He let out a sharp breath. "Princess, I signed up to move cargo, not get tangled in royal family feuds. That was before I knew the entire Draconian fleet wanted you back." He gestured toward the viewport. "Every moment I keep you on this ship, I'm putting myself in the line of fire." Her expression didn't change. "You can leave." Elias narrowed his eyes. "If you want out," she continued, "you can drop me at the next station and go back to whatever life you had before this." Her voice remained even, but there was something underneath, something measured, deliberate. "But you won't." Elias ran a hand through his hair, exhaling through his nose. She wasn't wrong. If he wanted out, he would have left already. A name flickered in his mind. Captain Drax. An old acquaintance, sometimes ally, sometimes rival. If there was anyone who could provide information, it was him. The Shadow Syndicate thrived in the underbelly of the galaxy, and Drax had his fingers in everything. He was dangerous, unpredictable, but he could be bought. Elias turned to the controls, setting a new course. I know someone who might help. No promises. Alzaria nodded. Drakthar remained still, but something in its gaze sharpened. The journey to Titan's Rest was quiet. Elias kept a wary eye on his scanners, but no immediate threats appeared. That didn't mean they weren't coming. The Draconians were patient hunters. Titan's Rest loomed in the viewport, a sprawling station built into the remnants of a shattered moon. It was a place for those who had no place. A lawless haven of smugglers, mercenaries, and traders who lived by their own rules. The air was thick with the scent of fuel and scorched metal, the neon glow of the markets casting strange shadows. Elias led the way through the crowded corridors, his hand never far from his weapon. Alzaria followed, hood drawn, posture rigid. Drakthar moved with slow, deliberate steps, the crowd parting instinctively around the beast. They found Drax in a dimly lit cantina, seated at a table littered with half-empty glasses and discarded playing chips. He was a broad-shouldered man with a cybernetic eye that flickered red when he looked up. A slow grin spread across his face. "Carter," he drawled, leaning back. "Didn't expect to see you alive." Elias pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "I need information," Drax chuckled. "Don't we all?" His gaze flickered to Alzaria, lingering just long enough to tell Elias he knew exactly who she was. Then to Drakthar. His expression didn't change, but Elias caught the way his fingers twitched against the table. "Interesting company you keep. Can you help us or not?" Drax exhaled, drumming his fingers. "Depends. How much is it worth to you?" Elias reached into his jacket, pulling out a small data chip. He slid it across the table. "Payment up front. Information first." Drax picked up the chip, turning it between his fingers. Then he smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile that meant good news. "Thing is," Drax said, leaning forward, "I already got a better offer." Alzaria stiffened. Drakthar let out a low, rumbling growl. Elias's gut twisted. A sharp click echoed through the cantina, the sound of safety releases disengaging. Elias didn't turn. He already knew what he would see. Drax's men, weapons drawn, their cold precision betraying that this wasn't just an ambush. It was a sale. "You sold us out," Elias muttered. Drax's grin widened. "You should have stayed out of this, Carter." The first shot was fired before he could move. A bright streak of energy seared past his shoulder, and the cantina erupted into chaos. Elias ducked, drawing his pistol in one fluid motion, returning fire as the crowd scattered. Drakthar moved like a force of nature. It lunged, jaws snapping around the nearest attacker, the sickening crunch of bone lost in the chaos. Fire erupted from its throat, engulfing the table in a wave of heat. Elias grabbed Alzaria's arm, pulling her behind cover. "We need to move." They fought their way through the corridors, pursued by syndicate enforcers. The docking bay was within reach when a shot grazed Elias's side, the pain sharp and immediate. He stumbled, but Alzaria caught him, her strength surprising. Then, the unmistakable hum of a warship's engines filled the station. Elias's blood ran cold. The Draconians had arrived. The bay doors blasted open, and armored warriors poured in. Drax's betrayal had been well coordinated. There was no time to think, no time to plan. Drakthar roared, fire splitting the air. But even the beast couldn't take on an entire squadron alone. Elias grabbed Alzaria's wrist. "Get to the ship." She hesitated for the briefest moment, then ran. Elias covered her, ducking behind crates, returning fire as they sprinted for the Odyssey. The ship's ramp lowered, and Elias shoved Alzaria inside, spinning just in time to see Drax emerge from the chaos, gun raised. They fired at the same time. Drax staggered, clutching his chest. Elias felt the burn of a shot tearing past his arm, but he didn't stop moving. He hit the controls, sealing the ramp, and stumbled into the cockpit. "Go!" he gasped. Alzaria was already at the controls. The ship lurched, engines roaring to life as it tore away from the station. The Draconian warship loomed in pursuit. Elias gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright. His vision blurred, blood dripping from his wound. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring. Then, a shadow passed overhead. Drakthar. The beast launched from the open cargo hatch, wings unfurling against the blackness of space. Fire erupted from its jaws, a searing blast that engulfed the nearest pursuing fighter. The explosion sent shockwaves through the void. The warship hesitated. Just long enough. Elias yanked the controls, sending the Odyssey into a warp jump. The stars stretched and blurred, and then silence. He slumped back, breathing hard. Pain throbbed through his side, but they were alive. Alzaria turned to him, eyes dark with unreadable emotion. "You didn't leave." Elias let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "Guess I didn't." She held his gaze. Drax was right about one thing. Elias frowned. "What?" Her expression was unreadable. "You should have stayed out of this." Elias exhaled, staring at the endless stretch of stars ahead. Too late for that. The silence in the cockpit was thick, but not empty. It carried weight, the kind that settled into the bones, threading unease through every breath. Elias sat slumped against the console, pressing a makeshift bandage to the wound on his side, watching as the starlines from the warp jump faded into the quiet black. The Odyssey had barely made it out. Another close call in a growing list of close calls. Alzaria stood near the viewport, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on something distant, something only she could see. Drakthar was curled near the entrance to the cockpit, his massive form rising and falling with each slow, measured breath. The beast had saved them. Again. Elias winced as he adjusted his position. "We need to talk about what's next." Alzaria didn't turn. "We both know what's next." He sighed. "Princess, I know I said I was in, but we barely survived that last fight. You said we needed allies. We lost the only contact I had. The Draconians know exactly where we are. Running isn't an option anymore." Alzaria turned then, and there was something new in her expression. Resignation, maybe, or something heavier. "I never intended to run." Elias stared at her. "My father isn't just hunting me," she continued. "He's hunting anyone who would stand against him. Drax may have betrayed us, but the Syndicate was never going to be enough. If we want to end this, we need to take the fight to them." Elias let out a short, bitter laugh. "Take the fight to the Draconian Empire? With what army?" Alzaria held his gaze. "With the ones who are already fighting." Elias frowned. "The Empire is not as strong as it appears," she said, stepping closer. "There are rebels, fractured warbands, outlaws who would see my father dethroned. They just need something to rally behind." Understanding settled in Elias's stomach like a stone. "You!" Alzaria nodded. Elias exhaled sharply, pushing himself upright. "You want to start a war. A war has already begun," she said quietly. "I only intend to win it." Elias stared at her, searching for hesitation, for doubt. There was none. He looked past her, at the viewport, at the endless stretch of void. He had spent years avoiding battles that weren't his. But this one had become his the moment he decided to stay. He shook his head, muttering a curse under his breath. "All right, princess. Let's go find your army." The transmission was sent through the old channels, coded in a way only those who understood the language of war would recognize. It was a call, an invitation, a challenge. The response came faster than Elias expected. They gathered in a hidden system on the fringes of known space, where broken moons cast long shadows over derelict stations and forgotten outposts. Ships of every shape and size filled the orbit, battered warcruisers, stolen fighters, scavenged freighters turned into makeshift gunships. It wasn't an army, not yet, but it was something. Elias stood beside Alzaria on the command deck of the largest ship, watching as leaders of the gathered factions filled the room. A rough-looking man with scars across his jaw. A woman with cybernetic implants woven into her skull. A reptilian mercenary whose species Elias didn't recognize. And others. All dangerous. All waiting. Alzaria stepped forward. No hesitation. No fear. "You all know who I am," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. And you know what I am asking? The scarred man scoffed. You want us to follow you into battle against the Empire? Alzaria met his gaze without blinking. I want you to finish the war you've already been fighting. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You expect us to believe you can win? The cybernetic woman tilted her head. You're one person. She's not alone, Elias said. Drakthar let out a low, rumbling growl from where he lay at Alzaria's side, his golden eyes sweeping the room. The gathered leaders shifted uneasily. Even in a room full of hardened warriors, the beast commanded respect. The Empire is crumbling, Alzaria continued. My father has made enemies of his own people. His warlords are fracturing. If we strike now, we can break them before they regain their strength. Silence. Then the mercenary leaned forward, his reptilian features unreadable. And if we fail? Alzaria's expression didn't waver. Then we die standing, not kneeling. The silence stretched. Then, one by one, the leaders nodded. The war had begun. The battle came sooner than expected. The Draconian fleet moved faster than anticipated, their ships arriving in force before the rebellion had fully mobilized. But Alzaria's forces had something the Empire did not: desperation. Elias gritted his teeth as the Odyssey weaved through the chaos, dodging weapons fire, his fingers flying over the controls. The battle was brutal, ships colliding in a deadly dance, explosions ripping through the black. On the main battleship, Alzaria led the charge. Drakthar was at her side, tearing through enemy ranks, fire and fury given form. Elias watched from the cockpit as she fought, not as a princess, but as a warrior. Then the moment came. The Empire's flagship loomed ahead, a fortress of steel and death. It was where her father waited. Elias's voice crackled through the comms. You don't have to do this alone. Alzaria's reply was steady. Yes, I do. She boarded the flagship with a small strike team, carving a path through the corridors. Her father was waiting in the throne room, adorned in battle armor, a warlord to the end. Their final confrontation was swift, brutal. He was strong, but Alzaria was stronger. When it was over, she stood over his fallen form, her breathing heavy, blood dripping from her blade. The battle outside had already begun to shift. The Empire's forces, leaderless and fractured, fell apart. One by one, the warships retreated, surrendering to the inevitable. It was over. Elias sat on the edge of the loading ramp, watching as the survivors tended to their wounded. He was exhausted, battered, but alive. Alzaria approached, blood staining her armor, but her eyes were clear. It's done, she said softly. Elias looked at her, then at the ruins of the empire she had left behind. What now? She exhaled, glancing at the horizon. Now we rebuild. Drakthar rumbled as he settled beside them, his golden eyes reflecting the stars. Elias nodded, a slow grin tugging at his lips. Guess I'm sticking around, then. Alzaria met his gaze. Guess you are. The stars stretched before them, endless and waiting. And the next story had only just begun.